Welcome to Mind Shield. We protect the mind and pursue the truth. Let's get started.
All right, let's talk about patents. We see them all the time, right? Incredible claims about some new technology, all wrapped up in this very official, very dense language. But what do they actually mean? Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on these documents. We're going to learn how to separate a really cool idea from something that could actually exist in the physical world.
And really, this is the main idea we need to get our heads around today. Just because an idea is patented, that doesn't mean it's been built. It doesn't mean it's been tested or that it's out there being used. Think of a patent as a protected idea, not a finished product you can buy off a shelf.
So for today's explainer, I'm going to be the engineer. It's my job to look at the patent and basically map out how it should work, according to the laws of physics and engineering. And I'm the skeptic. My job is to take that neat little map and ask the tough questions. What's missing here? What are the physical limits they're not telling us about? And the big one, what evidence would actually prove this thing is real? Together, we're going to slice right through the hype.
Okay, let's get into it. Here's our game plan. First, we're going to introduce a framework we call the evidence ladder. Then we're going to apply it to a real-world patent for something called a hearing system. From there, we'll dig into what the patent doesn't tell you, teach you a crucial skill called signature thinking, and we'll wrap up with our core promise for this whole channel.
Before we even touch a specific claim, we need a good toolkit, and that's what the evidence ladder is. It's our structured way of sorting fact from fiction. It keeps us grounded, making sure we climb from the absolute weakest kind of evidence all the way up to the strongest.
So these levels are designed to build on one another. Right at the bottom, step 1, you've got patents. They're just claims, ideas about a capability. A step up from that, you've got official assessments, things like government reports or declassified docs that might talk about research, but not necessarily that something was actually used. Above that, you've got peer-reviewed physics. This tells us what the laws of nature will and will not allow. And at the very top, the gold standard, field observable signatures. This is the real deal, physical, measurable proof that something exists and is operating in the world.
All right, time to put the ladder to work. We're diving into U.S. Patent 487027. It's titled, very simply, Hearing System. Now, this was filed back in the late 80s, and it claims to be a method for sending sound directly into a person's head using microwaves. It's a concept sometimes called voice-to-skull, and believe me, it is fascinating but also wildly misunderstood.
Now, the interesting thing here is that this patent is actually based on a real, documented scientific phenomenon, the microwave auditory effect, or the Frey effect. So how does it work? Well, a really quick pulse of microwave energy hits your head. It deposits a tiny, tiny amount of heat. That heat causes a microscopic but very sudden expansion in the tissue, creating a tiny pressure wave. That little wave travels to your inner ear, and your cochlea perceives it as a sound, usually like a click or a buzz. The patent's big claim is that you can actually control these pulses to create understandable words. So, with my engineer hat on, this is how I'd sketch out the patent's claim. You start with a microwave source. You then modulate it. Basically, you stamp an audio signal, like a voice, onto that microwave carrier. Next, you have to amplify that signal to give it enough power. Then you use an antenna to focus it and send it out as a beam. That beam travels through the air, interacts with the biological tissue in the target's head, and finally, it's perceived as sound. See? On paper, it's a completely logical chain of events. But paper is one thing. Reality is something else entirely.
Right. That's a very clean diagram. Maybe a little too clean. See, a patent only has to describe a new idea. It doesn't have to prove that the idea is practical or safe, or even that it works well. So my job is to ask, what crucial, messy details are being conveniently left out of this perfect little flowchart?
And this is exactly where that neat diagram starts to fall apart. First off, safety. To get a sound that's actually clear and understandable, you might need power levels that could literally start to cook tissue. Not good. Second, range and efficacy. The patent just kind of hand waves away how much the signal weakens over distance or trying to go through a wall. And what's more, actual peer-reviewed science shows the Frey effect creates clicks and buzzes, not so much crystal clear sentences. And let's not forget the most important parts. A patent is not proof this was ever built, and a system for covert use, which would need a ton of power and a pretty big antenna, well, that would be incredibly hard to hide.
And look, this quote from a Jason advisory report really nails the point about safety. The main physical effect that has been proven time and time again is thermal. It's about heating.
Any claims about more complex, non-thermal stuff, well, they're on much shakier scientific ground. The primary proven effect is heat, and heat has consequences.
Okay, so the patent is just a claim, and the physics show us there are some huge hurdles. To get any closer to the truth, we've got to climb to the very top rung of our evidence ladder. If a device like this was actually being used, it wouldn't be magic. It would have to follow the laws of physics. And in doing that, it would leave a footprint, a detectable trace. We call this thinking in signatures. Signature thinking is a really simple but incredibly powerful way to approach these things. It forces us to move away from just believing a claim and toward finding proof we can actually verify. For any piece of tech, you just have to ask, what are the unavoidable physical clues it would leave behind? What could my instruments actually measure? This is how you make a claim falsifiable, which just means you can design an experiment to try and prove it wrong.
Exactly. And this is where the fantastic claims slam right into messy reality. A silent, invisible beam of voices. In the real world, that's a powerful, very specific radio frequency signal that a spectrum analyzer could spot in a heartbeat. A covert, hidden device, it still needs power, which generates heat, and it needs a directional antenna, which has physical size. A beam that works through any wall? Well, its signal strength is still going to drop in predictable ways as it passes through stuff, and you can measure that. And RF energy is never a perfect laser beam. It scatters, it reflects, and it creates a detectable field all around the target.
So if you ever really wanted to investigate a claim like this checklist is what real evidence looks like. It's not about feelings or stories. It's about hard data. You'd need time-stamped recordings from a spectrum analyzer. You'd need calibrated measurements of the power density to see if there's even enough energy to matter. You'd have to show a clear link between when the signal shows up and when the symptoms happen. And you'd have to rule out all the normal stuff that's floating around us every day, like Wi-Fi and cell signals.
And all of this brings us to the fundamental principle of what we do here. This isn't about just shooting down ideas for fun, and it's not about blindly believing wild claims either. It's about sticking to a rigorous, evidence-first approach to everything we look at.
Our pledge is to always separate documented claims from pure speculation.
We will always identify the physical constraints, and we will always name the disconfirmers. That is, the evidence that would prove a claim is false.
Because if you can't even imagine what evidence would prove you wrong, you're not doing science.
You're just telling a story.
So the next time you stumble across a patent that sounds like it's straight out of a sci-fi movie, don't just treat it like a prophecy of things to come. Read it like an engineer and interrogate it like a skeptic. Always ask for the signatures. Let us know in the comments what we should break down next. Thanks for tuning in.